Hey, what's up you guys, the Curious Owl here, and today I will be reviewing The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. So this is the fourth book in the Wheel of Time series, so like I've been saying in my other review videos for this, if you have not read up to this book, I would highly suggest that you do so, because this review is going to contain spoilers in some capacity for things that happen in the previous books, whereas the review for this book in particular will try to be as non-spoilerly as possible, but I just want to give that disclaimer up front so that you guys know if you're watching this review, you have to have read the first 3 books and maybe even the prequel by this point to be able to understand what's going on in this book. So the main point of this novel is that there's a lot of things that are carrying over from the third book, The Dragon Reborn. Namely, one of the biggest things is that one of our main characters, Randall Thor, ends up journeying to what is called the Aiel Waste. It is essentially a part of this continent that is severed off from the rest of the continent and has the people, the Aiel, who are kind of considered to be these very otherworldly, I guess, kinds of people. They're very different in their culture and the way that they handle things and what Rand and his companions know about the people that live in his world. Now, the reason he's doing this is because part of the prophecy of being the Dragon Reborn is that Rand is supposed to go to the Aiel Waste to bring the Aiel people back together. Because Rand himself is actually Aiel. He has learned over the course of his journeys that he is part of the Aiel. He had family that basically had brought him over from the Aiel Waste during the Trolloc Wars, and he was abandoned and then given to the parents that he grew up with. But basically the reason he comes back to the Aiel Waste is that this prophecy states that he is basically going to get all of the Aiel tribes to come back together as one in order to go against the Dark One further on down the line. Along with this, Rand has Egwene, Mat, and Moraine and Lan journey with him to the Aiel Waste, along with the help of an Aiel named Avienda. Now, there's a lot of different plot lines going on within this. First of all, Mat ends up becoming very enraptured in this idea of what his destiny is within all of this. There's a lot of things that I think are very questionable in terms of finding out what that is, and he does find out that he has a much larger role to play than he ever thought possible. Egwene is basically going to the Aiel Waste to find out more about this idea called Dreamwalking. She's been having this ability where she has been able to use her dreams as a way of kind of obtaining information secretly, and also in some cases traveling to different lands without actually physically going there. She's able to dream of places and travel there, but the dream-walking state is very, very dangerous. So it's very important for Egwene to go to the place in the Aiel Waste where she's going to be able to learn how to do this to protect herself, but hopefully use this ability somehow in their journey to take down the Dark One. Along with this, we have Perrin, who ends up splitting off from the rest of the group because he is basically being called, in a sense, to go back home to Emond's Field because it is found out that there are a group of White Cloaks who are kind of this very religious, zealoty kind of group that are against the Dark One, but tend to make everybody think that their neighbors are Dark Friends or followers of the Dark One, when in reality they're not, just for the slightest inconvenience. And essentially Perrin travels back to try to protect Emond's Field that is being overrun by White Cloaks, and they are looking specifically for Perrin because of the fact that in one of the other books, I believe it was in The Great Hunt, Perrin had killed the father of one of the White Cloaks that is currently invading Emond's Field, and they are seeking revenge. In addition to that, they are also looking for Rand because the White Cloaks are basically thinking that any person who convinces people that they are the Dragon Reborn are actually Dark Friends. Only the White Cloaks will know who the Dragon Reborn is, so they're looking for Rand as well to basically arrest him and possibly kill him for being a false dragon, as what they call people who claim to be the Dragon Reborn, but are really not. In that plotline too, Perrin is accompanied by a young woman that we meet in the Dragon Reborn named Fael, or Zareen is her real name, but she goes by the name Fael, who he is very quickly falling in love with and feels like he has to protect her, even though she's pretty much proven that she doesn't need to be protected, but he has this very strong romantic feeling for her that basically gets tested in this book, and I really, really enjoyed it, but I'll hold that off until a little bit later. Finally, the last plot thread we have within this is the return of the character Min, who we left at the very beginning of The Dragon Reborn as she was heading to Tarvalin to speak with the Amaryllis Sea about the events of the Great Hunt. And essentially, what we see at the very beginning of this is that Min does arrive at Tarvalin to speak with the Amaryllis Sea, but she starts to realize that things are not as what they seem in the White Tower, and it's very likely that there are some dark things stewing about in terms of the political structure of the White Tower and the people that are in charge of it. So that's really all I can say in terms of the synopsis, not spoiling much of what happens, but what I will say is that there's a lot of stuff here that is in play. That fact alone of Min being back in this story is one of the things I really, really loved about this. I love that we finally got to see Min get to the White Tower, but it's also really interesting to see that there's a lot more going on at the White Tower than what we already know, because we know that Swan Sanche is already in cahoots with Moraine as they were best friends going through their training to become Aes Sedai, and they both are aware of what their ultimate plan is in terms of Rand and what they can use him for. So it's interesting to see that there's other things happening in the White Tower that maybe the Amaryllis Sea doesn't know of, that Min is starting to catch it up on. But the thing is that what I would like to know is down the line, how is Moraine going to know what's been going on in Tarvalin while all this is happening? How is she going to find out about what happens to everybody in this one? I don't know. I'm curious to see though if that gets brought up at all in book 5. I just really like how these books are able to showcase how people can obtain information in what seems like a fairly long time period, but for us as the reader, we can see sequentially in each book somebody getting some kind of information about things that happened in the last book. Finally, the last thing I really liked about this is, like I said, the whole thing with Perrin. Perrin's storyline, I think, is the best one I have seen in this book in particular. It was my favorite thing about this entire book. I loved his entire storyline from beginning to end because I think that it really showcased that badasseriness I was looking for with Perrin, that I could see from the beginning of this series. I have always loved watching through Perrin's eyes, and to see a lot of that story come around and showcase how strong he is and how wonderful he is made me so happy. But it honestly feels like that this means that there's also going to be a breakaway from Perrin in the next books, and it's not clear if that's true or not. But I'm a little worried because I don't want to leave Perrin. Perrin is a favorite character of mine, and I will be very upset if I don't get to see him ever again in this series. I did give this a 3-star because I feel like for the majority of this, was very confused. And that is because the majority of this book does take place in the Aiel Waste, and there's a lot of stuff about the culture and a lot of stuff about what's going on there that I felt very confused by. Not just with Rand's perspective, but Matt's, Egwene's, every one of the characters that are involved in the Aiel Waste. That whole section of the book I felt like I was lost on, and I did have to do a lot of research. I feel like I just don't understand what at all happened, truthfully. I feel like I just didn't retain anything, and even when researching, I feel like I didn't grasp anything that I researched either. Now, one of the reasons we end up going to the Aiel Waste at all is because Rand says that he is basically going to do something that the Dark One is not going to think of. He's going to do something completely unexpected. But we don't really know clearly what that unexpected tactic is. I think it was supposed to be that he's supposed to adhere to the prophecy because he has spent so long up to this point denouncing the prophecy, not believing that he's the Dragon Reborn, then realizing he is the Dragon Reborn, but still not really wanting to adhere to anything that's been said about what the Dragon Reborn is supposed to do. So I think that going to the Aiel Waste and combining the Aiel groups was supposed to be the surprise tactic because it was technically following the prophecy that he's been denying for so long. I think that's the case. I don't know. I definitely feel like that whole part of the book, I just completely lost track of everything. And I feel like that whole unexpected thing that he was supposed to do, I just completely lost the thread on. Another thing I really didn't care for is Matt's perspective because, again, it was super confusing. I feel like I don't know anything of what really happened to him. I feel like he just didn't do a lot, but he did do a lot. Like, he went through this very traumatic experience in a lot of ways, and I just feel like, again, I don't think I retained anything specifically of what happened to him, because I can remember some things about what happened to Rand, but when it comes to Matt, I don't know shit about what happened to him. He was completely out of the story in terms of my memory. That's really all I can say about this. I feel like I was just lost. I don't know what it is about books 3 and 4, but they were not as great as what I loved about books 1 and 2 and the prequel, so I'm hoping that with book 5 things are going to turn around for me. I would really hate to see that only the first 2 books and the prequel are the ones I really seem to enjoy and the rest of the series not so much. I also am going to say here right off the bat that it is entirely possible that by binging The Great Hunt, The Dragon Reborn, and The Shadow Rising all in the same month, it is entirely possible I lost a lot of information because I was so ready to get it over with, in a sense, because I was binging 3 of these books within the same month. So keeping that in mind, that's also something that went into my rating, because I think that if I hadn't kept that in mind, this would have been more of a 2-star. But I feel like that with the research I had done after reading this, I feel a lot better about what I remember happening. And I am very fully aware of the fact that I just feel like I read way too much of The Wheel of Time within the span of a month. So it'll be very nice for me to take a small break from reading this for a couple of weeks. In the beginning of April, I'll be reading a few other books before getting back into this world, so that I feel like I can come back to the world a little bit more fresh and feeling like I can actually put my full focus into the Fires of Heaven. Which, speaking of which, let's go into what the synopsis and my thoughts are for the Fires of Heaven. So the synopsis for the Fires of Heaven from Goodreads reads, "The bonds and wards that hold the great Lord of the Dark are slowly failing, but still his fragile prison holds. The Forsaken, immortal servants of the Shadow, weave their snares and tighten their grip upon the realms of men, sure in the knowledge that their master will soon break free. Randall Thor, the Dragon Reborn, knows that he must strike at the enemy, but his forces are divided by treachery and by ambition. Even the Aes Sedai, ancient guardians of the light, are riven by civil war. Betrayed by his allies, pursued by his enemies, and beset by the madness that comes to the male wielders of the one power, Rand rides out to meet the foe." So, 4 big things I would like to see get brought up outside of the main synopsis of the story. What are the consequences of what happens to Rand and Matt in The Shadow Rising? Specifically Matt. There's a lot of things that he basically finds out about what his path is, like I said, that is very important to him in terms of where he fits within the whole pattern. What are the consequences of him learning that? Is it possible that he was not supposed to learn about that until much later? What exactly are the consequences of the actions Rand has at the very end of The Shadow Rising? There's a lot of things that he deals with. There's another big battle scene at the very end that I think is going to really affect the way things go, because it does involve the bringing on of another character that we don't really know anything about and whether they're going to actually help or not. Secondly, does Lanfear play a bigger role than she already does? Because in The Shadow Rising, toward the very end, she does show up and cause some issues. So I'm curious to see if from here, based on what happens at the end of The Shadow Rising, does she play a much bigger role further down the line, to the point where she may possibly be an ally? Third thing, will we see anything else with Perrin? That's my biggest problem, is I don't want to leave Perrin. I want Perrin to still be a part of this series, so I'm really hoping he's still in it, or at the very least, maybe we take a break from him for a book and then go back to him in book 6, but I really don't want his storyline to be done, because I think that there's a lot of other things that can be done with him specifically. Finally, the last plan. What is Min's plan now? Because things happen very, very quickly for Min in The Shadow Rising, where they turn to shit, and there are some interesting things that arise in the shitstorm that I'm curious to see how that plays out. And then therefore, how does that play into the overall pattern of how things are? So there's a lot of good things coming, I think, that I'm excited to see how everything kind of weaves together and kind of all plays out by the end of the series. But I feel like book 5 is going to start bringing us into a new era, because with this one, I feel like The Shadow Rising, we really saw Rand in a lot of ways adhere to what he now knows is his destiny. He realizes what his destiny is, and he's kind of taking the bull by the horns, and I'm very excited to see where that bull takes him in book 5. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys have your own thoughts on The Shadow Rising you would like to share with me, as long as they are non-spoilerly, please feel free to share them in the comments below. Also, without spoiling anything, if there are things that I need to look out for in the next few books, please feel free to let me know. I would really appreciate it if you guys could tell me things that I need to watch out for, characters I need to be aware of that might be really important later on. Whatever the case may be, just try not to spoil anything for me or for other readers who are brand new to this series. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!